Good morning. Welcome to our Fireside chat on policy and progress. We'll dive straight into the bold and big questions. How will AI, digital trust, and bold policy shape our region's future? As AI transforms every sector, the policies we shape today will decide whether our region leads with trust, innovation, and resilience. This session isn't just about technology. It's about building public confidence, putting people first, and ensuring that AI serves everyone equitably and ethically. This morning, you're going to hear from leaders who are just not talking about transformation, but they are making it happen. So on that note, let me welcome up my guests. First of all, please help me welcome to the front row, Senator the Honorable Dominic Alexander Smith. My next guest I'd like to bring up is Dr. Dora Noel, Deputy Governor of the Central Bank of Trinidad and Tobago. Next up, we've got Mr. Rudy Rampasad, Board Director of TTMA. And please also help me welcome up Mr. Kirk Henry, Chair of the DPD Committee at the Chamber of Industry and Commerce of Trinidad and Tobago. And of course, my guest list wouldn't be complete, and frankly, my performance review wouldn't be complete if I didn't take the opportunity to welcome back up Mr. Mervyn Ayara, CEO of Fujitsu Caribbean. So, gentlemen, welcome. And I did intend to stick to my promise of keeping these questions very simple, on the light side. But I made the mistake of asking a few members of the audience what questions they would like me to ask of you, and it got a bit difficult. So bear with me. So first of all, I want to get a little bit personal to start with. You're all playing key roles in influencing and shaping AI policy in some form or fashion. When you think about that opportunity and that responsibility you carry, if you could keep it punchy, what are the two things, the two feelings you have about that responsibility? What comes to mind? It's just two words. Are you excited? Are you challenged? Whatever comes to mind. Minister, why don't I start with you? What feeling comes to mind when you carry that burden of policy in the Caribbean?
Are you inferring that the government should start first all the time? All jokes aside, I think responsibility comes to mind. We all have an inherent responsibility. And I mentioned in the feature address that responsibility is very personal to me, having come from the people themselves who would have voted and give me the opportunity to be here. So certainly responsibility comes to mind. And I think the second one that comes to mind is intention. I think intentionality is super important in the way in which we craft policy, the way in which we treat with innovation. I think it's always important to start with the best intention, and then as A would have mentioned, the execution, etc., will come after the fact. But you must have the vision, you must have the goal, you must have the intention. So for us, I think those two things are well aligned, and I'm looking forward to the citizens receiving so much benefit from the technology and the solutions that they're about to see in the coming months.
Thank you.
Thanks. First of all, to all, and thanks for the organizers for having me this morning. It's not often the regulator gets to sit amongst people in technology sector to talk about technology. But from the central bank perspective, first of all, comments I made this morning is not necessarily the view of the central bank, but my own. I'll need to start with that. You know, but from the regulator perspective and my personal perspective, I think we are excited. We're excited about AI and the transformative benefit it's likely to bring across sectors. But we will also, as a regulator, concerned about the issue of stability. Yeah.
Thank you.
Good morning, and thank you guys for having us. So I think just very quickly, I think two big things are like from a private sector style. One, trust, because there's a lot of data that's going to be shared, personal, private, both for companies and individuals. But more importantly, in terms of our policy and the regulator side, how do we allow to continue for innovation and not stifle that innovation? But how do we kind of manage outcomes versus trying to stop manage ideas? So I think that's the big side of how we manage from our side.
Yeah.
Sure.
So, firstly, I want to congratulate Mervyn on the conference, the summit. ActivateNow, I think it was a few years ago, I participated in one, and we did it during the COVID pandemic. I think, for me, when I think about AI and the emerging technology, two words come to mind. Everything the panel, my colleagues mentioned, but I have to say, start now. And the reason I say that, if you recall, around the 1990s, early 1990s, the minister referenced Estonia. And around 1991, I'm not a historian, Estonia would have gained their independence. And around that time, the country, through their leadership, took a decision to invest heavily in education and in internet technologies. The result is that today, every event, every public sector type discussion around technology must include the name Estonia. Estonia is a country that looks like us in terms of demographics, well, not so much demographic, but size. And the difference, what they did differently, I think both the minister and Mervyn mentioned it, was that they activated, they started, they did. So we must, I think we are at the cusp of a big opportunity for Trinidad and Tobago and the region. And we must start now if we are to create the legacy for our children.
Thank you. Mervyn?
Yeah, so I would agree with Minister on intent. So for me, purpose, I think being clear about purpose is important. And as I said, I think AI should be human-centric ultimately in its intention. The other thing I would say, Adrian, is mindset. AI requires a completely different mindset. From the simplest use of chat GPT, you have to master the questions you're going to ask. And you master the questions by having a completely open mindset. Most of us are constrained within the walls of the window that we are looking through. The real power from AI comes. I clearly have a mic problem. Comes from thinking outside of barriers. And I think that mindset will be my second issue that we have to face now to get value.
Yeah. Thanks, Mervyn. Minister, if I could just go back to you for a second. After all, I think you're the only member of the panelists who's got AI in your title, so surely you're going to get a lot of questions wherever you go. You've been an advocate for digital sovereignty and resilience. Could you share, how do you see national policy being shaped to tackle those principles around national resilience and sovereign policy, or sovereign data, as you mentioned earlier, and certainly sovereign AI? What are the tenets that the policy must address in that regard?
Thank you for your question. I think it's a very complex question.
It was from the audience, by the way.
Which one of you put that question? No, it's a very complex question. And see, sovereignty, CEO would have mentioned the concept of silos. And so Caribbean people, there's a need for us to be vulnerable when we're speaking about technology and even the way in which we work and operate. And so what does sovereignty mean for us? And we could look at the historical precedent that has been set in terms of sovereignty. We are part of a history of enslavement, of indentureship, of all of those things, which have caused us to be very sensitive and I would say selfish in many respects in the way in which we traditionally operate, because it requires, in terms of self-protection, we're in preservation mode. And so when we consider the concept of sovereignty and data sovereignty, you're speaking about your individual data and your willingness to share details about yourself with other partners and stakeholders, right? So there's the individual level where it requires individuals to share this information, or sometimes we share this information already. Many of the platforms and the devices that we use are already capturing information. But I think it's important for us to own and manage our identity in this age of technology because of the risk factors associated with it. So sovereignty challenges us on an individual level to really understand what we're putting out into the internet and in other spaces, and to take responsibility for that. And that again is challenged by the historical context. Then you can go globally. Typically the Caribbean, because we're small island developing states, because we are constrained by population size, because we're constrained by the realities of the economics of the Caribbean, meaning we're vulnerable to hurricanes. Yesterday, unfortunately, we had that issue down in the west in terms of the tornadoes. So we are a vulnerable society. And therefore, because we're vulnerable, we are usually consumers of data, information, and platforms and infrastructure. And because of that, we're not creating our own systems and platforms to then have a stake in that sovereignty. And as the developed nations, the global north and south, as they progress technology, which they will do because they have the resources to do so, how do we have the conversation of, okay, given that you're propagating a technological platform or software, or etc., how do we still own our information in that ecosystem? So there's the more global conversation. The third conversation about sovereignty, okay, given the dynamics of we're small island developing states, we have our constraints, we're vulnerable, we are typically consumers of data, technology, systems that are not our own. How do we, understanding that, participate in the responsibility of owning our own sovereignty? And that comes from collaboration. So when we speak about cloud, when we speak about data centers, when we speak about DPI, we have to understand as a collective, we do have the power to own and manage our data and our information, but it happens through participation, it happens through collaboration, it happens through, as I mentioned before, intentionality, and that will determine how we operate in this wider global evolution that's happening. And the one thing I would say is the best way to manage and govern your sovereignty is to be a participant and not a recipient. So having these conversations, meeting with various stakeholders, and also understanding that we too, as a collective, can be part of the wider conversation. We can be a part of the Security Council in the UN. We can be a part of the bilateral conversations that are happening. And we also represent strategically the connection between the North and the South. We are part of the Caribbean archipelago. We connect through Florida. We also tapped into Latin America by the South. So understand that when it comes to technology and AI, we are leveling the playing field. Two, understand that we have the right and opportunity to participate in the conversation. And three, at this point, right now, even though there have been advances and people are ahead of the curve, private sector is also ahead of the curve when we speak about OpenAI and XAI and all of these companies that have certainly begun the thrust of creating what the new wave of sovereignty will be. We also have an opportunity to participate and partake in that if we, act now, if we activate now. So,
Thank you. Kurt, if you could just maybe give a broader perspective from your vantage point, what are the principles that national AI policy and even AI policy across the region should adopt in order to ensure that, we focus on sovereignty as being a key principle there?
Is that your question or from the?
No, that's mine.
Okay.
Gentle. Yeah.
No, but I need to build on what the minister was saying. Prior to the discussion around AI, there was lots of discussion around data and data sovereignty. I mean, if you recall, it was a big deal because prior to the AI bubble, we had a BI bubble and a data warehousing bubble. Sherwin probably could remember those days. And the reality, there are some models that we could follow. So around 2023, a standard came out, an ISO standard around AI management, 42001. And it speaks to models to manage the risk associated with the use of AI. And it works for both at the national level, country level, and within organizations. So if we're talking about this part of the world, we need to talk about maintaining human dignity. UNESCO, I think, would publish some guidelines around what governments need to do as they roll out or delve into the realm of artificial intelligence. The tenets around explainability and managing bias in the implementation of AI solutions in our public operations is also critical. But I wanna just dive a bit into the physical world. We talk about online, offline interactions. We even spoke about ecosystems. This part of the world, in our region, we're talking about 7 million odd people. We're talking about, we have a history of legacy institutions established to bring our region closer together, to give us more of a voice in the global marketplace. So we need to establish rules or models around our unique perspective in this part of the world, our region, whether it is, for example, in Jamaica, we have a data protection act. In Trinidad, we have a kind of older one, but I know work is being done on that. In Barbados, there's some, but we are effectively in a zone. We have the CSME, we have CARICOM. So really and truly, we should start thinking about the ecosystem, about having, for example, Fujitsu, Movin mentioned the data center, the government for Trinidad, but it's a data center that is domiciled in this part of the world. So the models that we utilize to implement or to create the generative AI or the large language model must be predicated on our experience. And we must have somewhat of an inward look at ourselves so that we could potentially benefit from, for example, a federated model. So establish what I like to call a constitution for the application of technology for the region. But of course, you would have versions or dialects of it in different territories. So that, coming back to the point, this is something I said back, I used to say a lot when I was at iGov. So that we shift the needle from being net consumers or downloaders to start creating and uploading content. But we must start by having a presence locally. Now, and what that means is the data centers, the regulators, the academic institutions, even the institutions in industry must align to come up with the model and agree, collaborate to come up with a model that applies to our part of the world, that will give our AI the explainability. It will take into consideration the biases that could creep in from the global, so that we could begin to have a voice and participate in what is happening now. That is the short answer.
Yeah, thanks.
Sure.
DG, if I could come to you. When you think about the work you're doing around modernizing financial systems, what do you see as the role of AI in doing that?
Sorry?
The role of modernizing financial systems, what do you see the role of AI to be?
AI have a very important role in modernizing society, because it can lead to very important economic benefits in addition to diversification. If we build out an ecosystem to support which AI is part of, we have improvement in terms of productivity, efficiency, and within organization process optimization. So it's very important, our users. But to go with that, we need to talk about the whole governance model, regulation framework around that, as well as the appropriate use cases. Because it's, for us, for the central bank, if we are looking at the issue of regulations of AI in the financial service sector, we recognize there's a tension between technology, stifling innovation, but at the same time, our concern of safety, consumer protection, fairness, security. So our approach might be a soft regulation approach, far as possible, to promote and allow innovation to foster. But we have to build in the necessary safeguards. Right? And from that perspective, we are likely to focus on the regulations and oversight of use cases rather than the technology. Still recognizing that the issue of model risk and technology risk still need to be within our focus. But the use cases are important because in the financial service sector, not all use of AI tools and AI systems might be appropriate. So therefore, that need to be focused, be part of any entity, determining the use cases, and from that, everything is followed with regards to governance, oversight, control, risk management, and everything else. So that is very important. I just want to go back and touch on the question of sovereignty, which was asked. I think it's important that we need to own the ecosystem. I think the minister talked about the digital public infrastructure, which obviously comprise of the EID, which the ministry is working on, payments, digital payments, but also part of that digital public infrastructure has to be the issue of data. Because everything in the ecosystem, the digital ecosystem, depends on data with the use of mathematical models. So we cannot avoid out of the digital ecosystem the issue of data and the sharing of data. So that is very important. In addition to the service that you want to onboard on those things, we need to own that ecosystem. We need to reside here, and we need the regulations, the governance, but also we need to manage the workforce shift. We need to build capacity. We need to retrain employees. We need to reduce the risk of reluctancy of adopting these technology in the workplace across ecosystems. So that is very important for the issue of sovereignty of our digital ecosystem. Yeah.
Thanks. I'd like to shift the conversation a little bit and talk about the human side of things, right? And maybe pick up on something you just said there, DG, around the ability to shift skills across society. I get the sense that you're concerned about maybe medium and low skill workers being left behind in this digital era, particularly by the emergence of AI. What do you see that at the policy level should be addressed to ensure that this risk is mitigated, that we do not leave people behind? You have a sense of what should be covered at the policy level in that regard? I'll leave it with you, Deputy Governor, since you raised the point. Yeah.
Sorry?
Yeah, I was trying to get a sense if you see what bear with us because the audio up here is kind of echoing, right? I'm trying to get a sense of what do you see when it comes to the risk of medium and low skilled workers being left in the era that we're in? what should policy address to ensure that doesn't happen?
Well, the policy has to address the issue of retooling of employees,
Yeah.
obviously. And that might include awareness, it might require subsidies, it might be relooking our educational system or curriculum, etc. Because AI requires a higher level of skills. So public policy has to be part of that conversation with regards to managing the workforce shift that we are likely to see going forward. We cannot avoid that entirely. We need to start pretty young, because I have a smartphone and I basically just make phone calls. Young people do a lot more on these smartphones than us. So we need to get them to start thinking outside of the traditional sciences, to be programmers, coders. They need to understand the value of data. Data is a commodity, it's expensive, and it has substantial value. But at the same time, they have to develop the skill sets with regards to, someone mentioned, to work in this environment. They need to develop the analytical side, much more important. Very important, coding the analytical sides and understanding the future shift that we are likely to. We need to manage the entire thing, and public policy, we cannot not. Public policy is very important, and it needs to be fashioned, very carefully to ensure that the capacity that needs to develop the ecosystem, the AI ecosystem, is there. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for that insight. Rudy, if I could come on to you, from a private sector perspective, what do you see we should be doing more around the issue of ensuring inclusivity and equity as we deploy AI across the private sector?
So I think a big part of what we see in the private sector now is that, a big shift in private sector we're looking at is how we move away from doing what we call the traditional administrative, monotonous redundancy of those type processes using AI, So like in our business, a big part of it is like, how do we use Claude and those type of programs now to read documents, automate, put those things into a manner we can use. Again, with less human intervention, it's faster, more efficient, less errors. Yeah. But then you're going to have part of the workforce that are now either idle or may not be equipped at this time for such a change in what we have. And I think a big part now has to go around on how we rework in terms of this part of this workforce to make those processes easier in terms of understanding gaps, making business even more efficient, instead of, in terms of, what we say AI is going to remove a job itself. But maybe look at how we create more innovation of that style in itself. And just to go to that point in terms of earlier of that, so a big part of what private sector is, I think, pushing on, what we're going to see creating is that things like prompt engineering for me, right? I mean, I have no idea about coding, right? But, over the last few months, spending some time with Cursor, Gemini, ChatGPT, speaking into it, I'm able to develop code and put it into a program, right? Again, so somebody like myself who's very much, not in the technology itself of coding, my ability to learn in terms of that, in terms of a less, what we call, sophisticated system of putting something into ChatGPT, speaking it, not even typing it, just speaking into ChatGPT, explaining an idea of what I want, getting that prompt out of that, and then putting it properly to another program, Gemini or Cursor, right? How do we now look at repurposing, or how do we start this idea of prompt engineering, or giving that education of it to a much earlier stage to our society? Just as much as we look at doing math and English in primary school, what are we going to do in terms of that now, in terms of building that future, building that workforce, repurposing our workforce from there? So starting with not just now, but building that future for this, and then understanding now how we repurpose our workforce that may be away from what we call a monotonous administrative style into repurposing into auditing, understanding gaps, making business more efficient.
Yeah, thanks. I think you're touching on the whole subject there around human to AI collaboration, right? And Mervyn, you sort of highlighted that as part of Fujitsu Global Strategy. Do you mind weighing in and give us a sense of what do you see from a technology perspective Fujitsu could be doing within the region to ensure that we maintain that principle of human to AI collaboration every step of the way?
I'm listening to the conversation and I'm reminded of the depth of knowledge we have and the bright minds. You know, Adrian, my response to that is nothing to do with technology. It goes to the how, right? And you know, at CTU conference, where Minister, you were at last week, and I'm aware, other conferences, there's no doubt in my mind that there's a lot of clarity on the what. We know what to do. You know, talking about a Caribbean bias on AI. I think Fujitsu can play a role of leading collaboration. I think we can bring people together as we're doing here. And the challenge I set out is that I think the first thing we need to do collectively is to agree the priorities and start, you know, whilst AI has its own freedom, in terms of how we use it to improve the quality of life for Trinidad citizens, there's a common agenda. And it's what is that, and then how do we make that happen? I think at the moment, everybody wants to be first, right? Everybody wants to be smarter than the other person. There is still generally across the region big barriers between government and private sector. I can tell you I've tried to collaborate, but then the question comes is there a conflict of interest, or we can't let you be the one to lead because somebody else will complain, right? And we're too small a demographic for that, and we will suffer. So I think Fujitsu, as an investor in the region, with Caribbean people, but with some global capabilities and experience and insights, can be an aggregator with a focus on let's help develop the agenda. And then by working with the various bodies that are represented here with our customers, many of our customers are people who define the future. Your ministry, NIBTT, WASA, they're all a part of the human centricity that we speak of. So that's an invitation. Test it. Say, Mervyn, your mouth big, we're going to test it, right? And I think we can live up to that expectation.
Thanks, Mervyn. I want to go to digital trust in a second, but I've got another audience question for the minister, if you don't mind. Minister, what steps is your ministry taking to ensure AI empowers citizens rather than exploit them?
I'm trying my best to hear what you're saying. I think I got, you said.
You didn't get the question.
You did get the question. Okay, so the question is, what steps are your ministry taking to ensure that AI empowers citizens rather than exploits them?
Okay, right. Exploitation. Okay. I think in general we've been very proactive in our approach. You know, anticipation is a hell of a thing, right? All of us, what we're doing here as business persons, as government, we have to anticipate the challenges that you know, new technology will bring. And though AI has vast potential, there are a number of risks associated with it. Some of it are very nuanced and specific to our Caribbean culture as well, right? Our Trinidadian culture. So I think in the past, 2 months, we've recognized first that there is a challenge. AI can be used to manipulate voices, it can be used to manipulate images, videos, etc. We are all aware of that. And that's not a problem that is unique to Trinidad. It's a problem that most developed countries, in fact, everyone across the world is challenged with. How do we avoid the potential risks? Well, there are a couple of things. One, there must be awareness, right? So I think Dorian would have touched on the awareness component, and very much so. The cabinet recently approved an awareness campaign, an AI readiness and awareness campaign, already cabinet approved, which will be rolled out across the nation. So I think that's something we can all give the government a clap for. Thank you, you're too kind, right? But the second component is that we've also set up 2 task forces. One was a Caribbean AI task force, which is which has been now comprised of a combination of academics, technocrats, some government ministers as well, including myself. They're the persons who are the experts, you know, in this field, in this realm, and they're the ones actively engaging in the technology and both the theoretical and the practical application of the technology in various environments. So we've set up already a Caribbean-enabled task force via the Caribbean Telecommunications Union, which Trinidad and Tobago has the honor of being the president for through my ministry till 2027. So we're very much poised to be at the head of that anticipation scale, right? The third thing is that the government has now set up an interministerial task force, which involves several key players, TTC CERT, you know, we've looked at Office of the Prime Minister, we've looked at members, representatives of Homeland Security, which deals specifically with cybersecurity because cyber is gazetted under that particular ministry as of now. And we've also had a discourse and conversation with specific agencies within the TTPS as well, including the FIU, including the SEC. So it's a conversation of, one, anticipation. It's a conversation of engagement, speaking to the right people who are, you know, at the head of the curve, at the tipping point of the conversation. And then, you know, as we all mentioned here, how do we now take that information, gather that information, analyze it, and derive some insights, right? And the insights will be, how do we protect the citizens in general? How do we make John public more aware of the risk? And then, you know, what are the available resources to citizens to then, you know, mitigate those risks as much as possible? I think it's not a perfect science. I think it's something that will continue to evolve as the technology evolves. But the important thing is that we try to anticipate and we take the necessary steps with urgency so that we avoid any sort of disruption, both in the way in which we run the government as well as how the public interacts with government-based services and private sector services.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks for sharing those initiatives you're working on. Rudy, if I could come on to you and pick up on the whole issue of risk, but sort of narrow in on digital trust being a risk. What do you see the key risks to digital trust as we go on this AI journey? How would you address them from a private sector perspective?
So I think a big part of it here, right? With trust comes about, you know, first we have to be able to trust that what we enter, you know, uploading that data is safe and secure if we want people to utilize and use that technology. So I think the first part around that AI trust has to be, how do we create an ecosystem that, one, we as Caribbean people believe and trust in, right? You know, we've traditionally have different challenges in the Caribbean, not unique to the Caribbean, but, you know, with, you know, different issues of data leakage and all those other things that goes around. How do we build an ecosystem that, one, we have trust in that data, so that when I am able to upload my birth certificate or my banking details, that I trust that the system that is here supporting in the back end, one, keeps my data secure, is not shared without my permission, but also there's no issue around fraud or anything like that around it, right? And the guys who run the infrastructure side will be a little more of how to manage that. But I think the first issue is how do we build a trust in that data? But then more importantly, with that data, how do we use that data now that we could collaborate among the ecosystem and not in a silo, right? Earlier when you talked just about the scalability of the Caribbean, our society is still very small in terms of both number, data, and usage of what it is. So building trust, and then now the data that is there, how do we now use that data to collaborate? You know, for example, you know, from what I'm seeing in the public, you know, there's a lot of programs going around, probably, I think, at the Ministry of Transport, digitalizing the driver's permit. Then you have with the birth certification, immigration, et cetera, et cetera. But how then we could build an ecosystem that with one data, maybe I upload one set of data now that these guys could use within a trusted ecosystem, an area that, you know, where there's some rules and guardrails that are around to protect what is being done. And then now, because it's limited, we can all use that data across then want to make us more efficient in what we want in terms of predicting analysis of maybe, you know, understanding different things for the health system, your healthcare, taking away that load, and then even going across in security, you know, in terms of vehicles, this driver's permit is associated with with this car, this shape, model, car, So you allow predictive analysis. So, even for the security services, instead of they are reacting to a situation, they are now being able to prevent a situation. So I think a lot has to go around with that building, that trust of how we trust the data, where we're uploading that data, how it's being secured, and then the usage and the type of usage of how we build that in that ecosystem.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, obviously it's a very difficult topic, and it's somewhat cultural, isn't it? Because I remember visiting Estonia, and we talk about Estonia a lot, Kirk, as being the model. But I also remember when I was there, reading that they do national surveys every year around trust. And the question is, what's the most trusted entity in Estonia? And it happens to be the government, even more trusted than the church. So when you build on that kind of tenant, trust is already inherent in their system of working. So digital transformation becomes a different problem for them to solve than we do. But thanks for taking that question, Rudy. I want to shift the conversation a little bit and talk about AI as a driver of growth and how national policy could help AI really fuel growth. And Deputy Governor, if I could come back to you for a second there, and I want to, sort of get your perspective on how do you see AI really fueling growth within Trinidad and the wider Caribbean economy. What needs to be in place that AI could be implemented at scale and could be a significant growth driver from an economic perspective? If you can have that answer that, Deputy Governor.
Well, because
Yeah.
To really get the benefits of AI, one aspect we have to treat with the issue of trust, right? So use cases and that issue of trust need to be built into the use cases. People need to have confidence that when they engage in AI, they see any benefits. So one is the issue of transparency, right? Transparency, very important. If there's no trust in the system, the ecosystem will not take off, we go and see the benefits. So the issue of transparency, we have to treat with the issue of transparency. Both when we use an AI to deliver services to customers, we make that known, we disclose that fact, for what purpose, what data is being used. We also need to have transparency in the data that is used, that these AI model is built in. We need to ensure that the data remain relevant, stable, and there is continued validation of the model that goes with it. Very important is the issue of sandboxes. We cannot just run out and develop all these innovations. We need regulatory sandboxes to give the innovators and the customers the time to build trust in it, see how it's working, etc. We fine-tune those services, etc. once they get these the results of these testing, etc. So those things are important. We need to build the public policy, the strategy, the governance framework, which is supported by the regulations, etc. Have regulatory sandboxes, ensure that there's awareness, consumer awareness, consumer protection, and the big issue is the issue of cybersecurity and the protection of data. So all these bits and pieces of critical components need to come together in unison, wrap around it with the appropriate safeguards, not too stiff, that will stifle innovation, but still allow innovation to foster, etc., to interact with the society on overall. Once we have those things in place, we will see the benefits of the ecosystem. It comes also supported by, again, building our internal capacity. Building internal capacity, but also ensure that the entire ecosystem resides in Trinidad and all the benefits and revenues is on our control.
Yeah.
Right? So it's quite a bit.
Thanks. If I can keep on this topic of ecosystems for a bit, Minister, if I could come to you and sort of, I suspect you have a unique perspective being a minister, but also have a private sector background, being an entrepreneurial background. What's the role you see of public-private partnerships in really driving AI at scale that can help national economic growth? What do you see as that key role?
To answer the question, I think it's, there's an inextricable link between what has to happen from the public sector. Public sector would drive policy alignment and so on. The strategy and the vision comes from the government. The private sector would have their own market-based vision. But at some point that intersects. Everyone would have mentioned, there are a lot of partnerships, as you can see. Fujitsu's, some of Fujitsu's customers are public sector based, part of the public sector. So, and I think in small open economies like our own, there is collaboration happening, even though it may not be as visible to the public as they think. So certainly there is a lot of opportunity for a more established engagement. I think, however, we look at private sector looks for incentives. What is the incentive to work with government? What is the incentive to collaborate on very specific projects? And then that alignment has to also be aligned with the government's vision for the country. What are the pillars of development that we're aligning on? So if we're saying that infrastructure that we are investing in from, let's say, the PSIP, how can private sector also align in their strategic vision, the products and services that they want to supply to their consumers? How does that align? And is there an opportunity for collaboration along those lines? We have to be very clear in terms of what are the opportunities in the next decade, 2 decades for our country. And there needs to be a conversation with various chambers, with various stakeholders to say, okay, we will partner with you on these very specific areas because this is also tied to our business objectives, our goals. It's aligned with our shareholders, and we will want to progress this with you, right? In that tapestry of negotiation, there will be elements of expertise, right? Private sector would have experts who would be part of their human capital, and government as well needs to then align its human capital development with the private sector, so there can be we'd use the word interoperability, right? A sharing of information across the two, so that there's skills development happening at the same time. There's innovation happening at the same time because those plans are aligned according to very specific pillars, right? And then by, naturally, through, symbiotic relationship, I think there will be much advancement on both sides. You'll have the private sector investing in projects that will create circular flow of income and accelerate the economy and encourage foreign direct investment from external partners, because people will see that this is a stable government, so stable private sector, and there's a ripe with opportunity for investment. So that can only redound to the benefit of the society as large. That will then create jobs. Jobs will then fuel more economies of scale. So I think there's no way we can separate the two. I think, if you look to the larger countries as well, you see larger companies also in great collaboration with governments. When we speak about NVIDIA, we speak about OpenAI, we speak about Elon Musk and XAI. All of these companies have begun to understand that there needs to be a conversation with states. And many of their projects are driven either in part by conversations with the state, because they know that the benefits and the growth and the success of their companies are inextricably linked. So that conversation needs to happen. So to answer your question, it is inevitable. Whether we choose to accept it or not, that's another question. How we choose to engage, that's another question. And it comes down to simple things like procurement as well, which is an important conversation that we've begun to have. So it will happen, but it will happen through more of this.
Yeah. Thanks for your encouragement there. I'd like to wrap things up by really talking about leadership and governance in the context of AI, right? Mervyn, you've been a strong proponent of organizations need to build digital muscles, starting with the leadership. When it comes to AI governance, what do you see as the major challenges leadership must face? You talk about mindset as being one of them. Are there other challenges that as leaders we must confront around the issue of AI governance?
Well, I think AI governance is going to have to take the same path as governance around security, for example. When we opened up networks for information to be shared, we then created a problem around security. Security then becomes a mission critical activity, responsibility of boards, leadership, right? I kind of see where AI is at the moment as the beginning of the internet, where there's a whole new set of issues, except we have lessons learned. So it doesn't have to wait until the learning and evolution of maturity comes. So I think, my advice to leadership is to treat it in the same way. Kind of go back to my call to action, right? Assume responsibility for it because it's probably the most significant changer of how things are done. Seek to understand it intimately. Don't be scared to learn, relearn, to get the support you need, but most importantly, build capabilities around you quickly to be able to leverage it. I think the thing with AI, again, adopt a human-centric perspective. And I would say, just to sort of connect some of the conversations, Adrian, trust comes through experiences, right? You don't all of a sudden trust a dentist. You get reputation, and then you have a few experiences and say, I really trust this person, right? I think we need to quickly build use cases across, again, going back to what's the action agenda. And the use cases for me need to go beyond bots. I see bots just as being automated, automating the same process. I think we need to be innovative around adoption of it. And I think leadership responsibility is to drive that, is to be proactive, to lead it, rather than just to respond to it. So that would be my response.
Thanks, Marvin. Yeah, it does take a bit of vulnerability to tackle some of those issues. Kirk, if I can come to you and sort of get your perspective on this, being the chair of the Digital Business and Technology Committee of the Chamber, you've got the sort of like the privilege of working with other leaders across tough issues like barriers. What are you hearing from them when it comes to their challenges with adopting AI, more particularly the governance around adopting AI? Are you getting insights from them around what the challenges are? And do you have any perspective on how we should go about addressing them?
Yeah, sure. That's a good question. A lot of the leaders in most organizations, they're grappling with the new technology. Moving kind of hinted at it. If you recall the advent of the internet age, the internet technologies, when networks were opened up, applications were being built, people were grappling with how do we assimilate this into operations, how we monetize the opportunity, how we protect ourselves. So all those questions are there. When I speak to leaders, when I speak to colleagues, I start with governance, and it's really a risk management discussion, understanding what the technology is, and putting in place the prerequisite governance mechanism, which starts at the top, because and governance really means translating the strategic intent of a knowledgeable board, executive leaderships into your shop or activities, right? There's guidance all around. I would have mentioned some at the top of the conversation. So the concern, just to answer the question directly, is about how do we bring this into our organization and use it without, and I hear this a lot, exposing all our information to the world and losing our competitive advantage. All fair concerns, but there are tools, there are mechanisms, there are processes, structures that we could use to build your operating procedures. But I wanna, if I may, go back to your question about value. The value proposition for AI really revolves around velocity. We are the cusp in this part of the world to utilize, to assimilate this technology into our operations and to create value in two places. Lower table stakes is efficiency. Improve efficiency. Moving talk about bots. In 2019, we implemented bots, rule-based bots like Gov. Nowadays, we're talking about an ANSI that the minister just launched. So we must get to benefit from that. Now, if we improve efficiency, what do? We increase productivity. And ultimately, that is where, citizens will feel it. Moving was touching his pockets when he was giving his presentation. So if we go a step above that, the mindset shift that is required so that we create value where we didn't see it before. This is a question I ask at every event that I get the privilege to speak at. Anybody in the room familiar with Amazon? Amazon. Right.
Never heard of it.
AWS, Amazon is moving its competitor. But AWS and partner. Talk on it.
You can listen to my presentation.
Move it. But the point I'm making here, Amazon Web Services didn't start off as a cloud. Amazon Web Services wasn't a thing. It was created when they internally did the I thing. They innovated to solve a business challenge that they had. And the result is AWS that all of us utilize today in some form or fashion. So we, as a people, have to go through a mindset shift. We need to move beyond just looking at the TikTok and downloading the app to looking for opportunities to leverage the tools in our business to do realization. So if now we take that approach, AI represents a boon, an opportunity to further increase our productivity so that as a people, we use less of the reducing natural resources that we may have and we create. So we move from net downloaders to net uploaders and we leverage the technology similar to what Estonia did. All Estonia did was to take advantage or to do what we call take first mover advantage. They went
You know, I'm glad you said that.
space.
I see you
You
in a
mentioned
while. Everything
Estonia.
good.
Moving has mentioned Estonia, the minister mentioned Estonia. I think it is a leadership opportunity and it requires a mindset shift. We are living in a new age. Bible says we cannot take new wine and put it in old skins. So we have to cast off that thinking and move forward.
Yeah, that's correct. To wrap it up, this has been a common theme, I think, coming from all of you, is that I think Kirk, you referred to as velocity, we need velocity. Mervyn, the minister, referred to as the power of now. I want to end off by asking this question. If we acted on the power of now, and we invite you back up on stage in 1 year's time as the next Activate, may not be in Trinidad, I hope you might accept Barbados. What would you like to see? What would be the key celebration that you'd like to share with the audience that we acted in the power of now and we're able to realize this as a result of that? Mervyn, why don't I start with you? What would you like to see from Fujitsu? If we acted now and we realize something in a year's time, what would it look like?
A clear collaboration framework where there's joint commitment to working to bring the power of now and how collectively focused on specific things, vibrancy, and an exemplar of what an ecosystem looks like.
Yeah. Kurt?
A year from now, I would love to see the region working with a sovereign model for generative AI that either solves or assists in solving or supporting activities that I would say are Caribbean-centric. I think that would be a step in the right direction.
Yeah, thank you. Rudy?
So for me, I think on our side, for a year from now, really a clear policy of how we do that public-private partnership in terms of AI development as we go forward. As you talk about sovereignty, something in the Caribbean, kind of the same way that we move people within the Caribbean, how do we move data and information throughout the Caribbean, currencies also, in the Caribbean as one. I think for me, that is what I would like to see next year as we go forward.
Yeah. Deputy Governor.
You know, I will just go back to what the minister discussed this morning, this digital public infrastructure. I think that is the backbone of the digital economy. EID, digital payments, and the issue of data. And if we just have an outline of how we're going to achieve that, that is a good starting point.
Yeah. Thank you.
Come on. So the question is 1 year or 5 years?
Based on 1 year, get 5 years.
For politicians, that is a totally different ballgame, right?
Yes.
So in 1 year from now, if we were to activate now, I would, for me, it would have to be every citizen can say that they appreciate and they can participate in online digital government services, right? That's the main thing. If I were to move a little bit further than now in a year's time, I want us to be able to say that we have acted now and we've been able to participate in the diversification of our economy via ICT-based services, right? I think that's a big win for us, right? And if I were to stretch a little bit longer, I'd want to have a digital society where everyone is included and no one is left behind, and technology can truly be the real equalizer for any person that wants to participate. That would be 3 big wins from then to now.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. So, gentlemen, thanks for ending off on a bold note. I'd like to thank you for, giving us your fresh perspectives and also bringing the passion you brought to this conversation. It's clear that you're all playing your different roles, a significant role in shaping AI policy and AI strategy across the region. I'd like to take this opportunity to wish you every success as you do so, and ask for your continued commitment to do so by enabling our region to lead with trust, innovation, and certainly transparency and integrity so that we can all benefit from the journey ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you.